This lesson was created and executed during the pandemic lockdown when I was teaching ceramics remotely. My advanced ceramics students wanted to make a teapot. I knew that a teapot would be extremely challenging, but the students were passionate, so I felt it could be successful. I did some research into step-by-step teapots as well as contemporary artists who create teapots and work in the arena of social activism. While working on my MFA through Vermont College of Fine Arts, from which I graduated in the summer of 2020, I was introduced to using art to enact social change, as well as the famous phrase from the second wave feminist art movement of the 1970s, "The personal is political." In this lesson, I challenged my students to search within themselves and ask, what is urgent to me, and how can I voice that urgency through my artwork? This lesson is a compilation of all of those thoughts. Each step in this process is linked to one or more of the visual arts state standards which we adopted in 2016. This first slide, I used Illinois Visual Arts Standard, Anchor Standard 1, generate and conceptualize artistic ideas and work. And I wanted the students to be able to visualize and hypothesize to generate plans for ideas and directions for creating art and design that can affect social change. So we watched Roberto Lugo's talk from the NCCA conference when he was awarded one of the Emerging Artist Awards. And I asked the kids to contemplate why Lugo uses the teapot as a vehicle, what sort of imagery Lugo employs, how does Lugo engage others in social engagement through his artwork. I asked them, what is urgent to you, what would you like to speak out about, and how could you employ those ideas in a teapot? I also had them look at Anchor Standard 2, organize and develop artistic ideas and work. And I really wanted them to document their work. So I created a Show Your Work document that introduced students to Pottery is Political and Musings About Mud, both from Instagram, and further understand Lugo and his work through watching The Articulate on PBS, reading about Lugo's work and philosophy, and reflecting on how this practice could relate to their own personal work. Now it became time to actually execute the project. So I was still on Anchor Standard 2, where students were organizing and develop artistic ideas and work, but I was also looking at explore and invent art-making techniques and approaches. Since we were in a virtual learning environment, it was vital that the kids would have to be inventive and innovative in their home studios. We also looked at a 10-step teapot project, which was adapted from Ceramic Arts Daily. And in order to fully document my process for making the teapot at home, I recorded myself doing each step except for step 8, 9, and 10. Working at home was new for me as well as my students, so I made sure to try the projects myself more diligently than if I was in the studio with them. If students were absent or had internet access issues, I was able to point them towards the resource that I made for them. So we went through step 1, gathering tools and materials. Step 2, creating a slab. Step 3, creating the body using a drape mold technique. Assembling the body of the teapot. Making the spout, handle, and lid. Attaching the spout. And also kind of troubleshooting how they wanted their teapot to look. I went through a bunch of struggle with my own teapot, so it was great because I got to help them kind of work through their issues. In this slideshow, I embedded a reflection lesson taught to me during my MFA program by my second faculty advisor. The purpose is to participate in transgression or breaking up the self to build the self back up. So through journaling and reading, keyword exercise outlined on slide 25, students worked with a partner to examine insular reactions to controversial or uncomfortable topics that may be subconscious. This exercise of critique and evaluation is universal, does not involve a numeric rubric or list of criteria. It's safe, but exposes the artist and their thought process. So what I did was I had the kids journal for 10 minutes, and then I had them read to a partner. I had them share their Pottery is Political Show Your Work document with their pre-assigned partner, and then in peer discussion, I paired them with a like-level artist because sometimes I get multi-level students in my classes. So sometimes I told them you will serve as a mentor or protege depending on your skill or experience level. So I asked them to read the reflection questions and their art artist statement that they developed, and while partner 1 is reading, partner 2 should write down keywords and phrases that stand out to them as evocative or repetitive, and then partner 2 reads their keywords to their partner. Repeat the process in reverse, and when both partners have read and shared, please take 5 minutes to write a short statement about the keyword reading process. Did your intention for this piece come across to your partner? We then went into Anchor Standard 5, which was develop and refine artistic techniques and work for presentation. So students should be able to critique, justify, and present choices in the process of analyzing, selecting, curating, and presenting artwork for a specific exhibition or event. So while working at home, students documented their process using a chart I developed to show their process. Rationale for this document was not only to document process and progress, but to avoid plagiarism. Students were forced to be more independent in their work, make choices and decisions about composition and concept, and how to put a voice to controversial or upsetting topics. And this was all very deep thinking for kids who are in high school without their teacher there to give them a pat on the back or hold their hand if they were having trouble. So this is an example of the midway reflection from one of my AP students. Gracie and I actually developed this presentation together. She's now a freshman in college, but I wanted to really highlight her because it was extremely successful what she came up with. So here is her midway crit where she reflects on her work and her process of developing this teapot that was centered around women's rights and women's right to choose. So now it became time to actually share their artistic voice with the world. This can be incredibly exposing, but we tried to do it in a, calm and comfortable space. So what I did was I started with Anchor Standard 6, convey meaning through the presentation of artistic work, identify and explain how and where different cultures record and illustrate stories and history of life through art. Roberto Lugo was a perfect example for the kids. In one of the videos linked to the presentation, specifically the Ensica talk, Lugo speaks about being able to converse about delicate topics in a civil manner. He employs his teapots as vehicles for conversation, stating that having tea together is considered elegant and sophisticated, and many of the topics he wishes to confront are divisive. He talks about how racism against Latinx people and how if a person who is racist against him could sit down and have tea and have a conversation with him, they may see they aren't all that different. The juxtaposition of the Confederate flag on this teapot with the discussion of racism against Latinx people is powerful and moving. From here, we went on to Anchor Standard 7, perceive and analyze artistic work. So the entire process of brainstorming and planning this piece was very deliberate. Some students were resistant, stating that they didn't think art had to be about something sometimes. It could just be art. I encouraged them to look further into this idea. Why were they resistant to creating a conversation? Why was it important to them to keep blinders on to divisiveness and controversy? Who were they? Were they white? Did they have enough money to live in a comfortable home? Were their parents educated? These are delicate questions. Because I had gone through seed training this year, I had access to some resources that I gently shared with these students. Links are located in the right-hand column. And here are some visuals with that are in those actual links. The How Privileged Are You quiz, as well as this pie chart, which basically shows how privileged they may be. And then now it's time to reflect. So we went back to the reflection questions, but they're a little bit different. What is urgent to you? What would you like to speak out about? How did you employ these ideas on a teapot? How does your artwork relate to your voice struggles? Show what is urgent to you. What was one thing that went really well for you? What was one thing that was challenging? How did you overcome these challenges? So now we're in Anchor Standard 9, apply criteria to evaluate artistic work. Apply one set of criteria to evaluate more than one artwork. So there are so many ways to critique and evaluate art. This project was more about developing a conceptual space to discuss difficult conversation and spark a discourse. In this slideshow, again, I'm going to refer back to my peer reflection and sharing. This really helped expose the artist and their thought process. From here, we were able to delve into writing an artist statement, which can be quite daunting for the kids. We also looked at connections to contemporary artists working in the field of social engagement. So I developed a chart that called Movie Mondays, because our Mondays were fully remote even when we went back hybrid. This relates to Anchor Standard 10, where we synthesize and relate knowledge and personal experience to make art, but also create works of art that reflect community or cultural traditions. So this project, through the research and planning, would yield results that were personal and carried feelings of urgency. The results varied from insular artworks to works about people's common experience, such as Black Lives Matter, women's right to choose, pro-life, etc. We also went into Anchor Standard 11, relate artistic ideas and works through societal, cultural, and historical context to deepen understanding. We appraised the impact of an artist or a group of artists on the beliefs, values, and behaviors of society, and this is when we get into the actual Movie Mondays, learning about artists of color. So connecting personal feelings and experiences with the contemporary art world shows students that artists are working to bring a voice to the voiceless. Artists have a unique gift to make the abstract come into focus for those who otherwise wouldn't understand. So introducing students to Roberto Lugo, Aaron Toole, and other artists, either of color or who work to create conversation about difficult topics, is imperative to the advanced students' growth. This chart was used on fully remote learning Mondays after our district returned to hybrid learning. The resources here were compiled to introduce students to artists who were creating a discourse about a divisive or uncomfortable topic and making it more accessible. Anchor Standard 2 goes back to organize and develop artistic ideas and work. We wanted to experiment, plan, and make multiple works of art and design that explored a personally meaningful theme, idea, or concept. So the Political Pottery Teapot project really propelled my student Gracie's voice and evolved her sustained investigation above and beyond expectation. So Gracie was an AP Studio senior working during the pandemic, an extremely difficult time to be away from peers and your instructor. Gracie was able to select, analyze, and interpret artistic work for presentation. She categorized artwork based on a theme or concept for an exhibit. She was able to develop a sustained investigation where she used mixed media, sculpture, and ceramics to show the relationship between sexuality, power, authority, and feminism.
The intent of my work is to represent the power struggle and vulnerability felt by women in society and to highlight the concept of rape culture or normalization of sexual assault and abuse. It represents insular experiences while speaking to society. Pieces 1 through 4 are mixed media, which introduce the theme of rape culture. These pieces illustrate the power dynamic between attacker and victim and the lasting impact of abuse and assault. In piece 6, I am illustrating the feeling of vulnerability and dissociation from one's own body following a traumatic attack. Pieces 13 and 14 expose female genitalia, putting it on display in a repetitive formation. Jarring but expressive, it is meant to destigmatize the overly sexualized female form. Pieces 15 and 16 target the government as the perpetrator. A woman's body has become highly politicized, and intent to remove women's right to choose what happens to her own body is a threat. This work is meant to show the power of the individual, represent the truth of traumatic experiences, and show that our sexuality and our bodies are our own.
The objective of this lesson was to venture on a journey of self-discovery, find an issue that stirs a sense of urgency within the artist, and give that issue a voice through art. I wanted to align the process with the Illinois State Learning Standards for Visual Art and create a resource that would be helpful to my colleagues. It is my hope that through these exercises we can create a discourse through socially engaged art. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and I look forward to answering questions and hearing feedback. Thank you.